Hello, folks. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Grace, and I am a yarnaholic. Okay, so maybe yarnaholic is a bit extreme, but I certainly have a yarn problem that I would like to talk to you about. I've been doing crochet regularly for about a decade now, and in that decade I've accumulated a lot of yarn, and lately I've been feeling a lot of shame about how much yarn I own. Personally, I think it's healthy when you are experiencing a feeling like shame to analyze where that's coming from, think about how you're going to fix it, and think about how you're going to move forward so that you don't return to that situation. I know, this is deep for yarn. Bear with me. The plan today is that I'm here to talk with you about how I came to accumulate all this yarn, why it's a problem for me, what I plan to do to fix it, and how this YouTube thing plays into that. I got serious about crochet in college. My grandmother had taught me when I was 12 years old, just kind of the basics, but then I was too cool for it, so I dropped off for a few years and came back to it when I was maybe 19 or 20. I didn't have a ton of time to dedicate to it up front because I was in college and working a full-time job. And I didn't have a bunch of money to dedicate to it up front because I was in college and that shit is expensive. I was always on the lookout for yarn on the cheap. I would buy it at a thrift store. I would stock up at big craft stores when they were having sales, or I would buy kind of crummy yarn just because it was what I could afford. Once people found out that I was crocheting, they would give me yarn. So, there are a lot of people out there who have taken up the craft and don't really do it anymore and have some yarn sitting at home, and they would see me crocheting and be like, oh, hey, do you want this? And of course I'm going to accept it. Free yarn, hell yeah. Like, there is this one multicolored pastel yarn. I have 5 skeins of it that was given to me by 3 different people. So I have a bunch of this yarn. I don't like it very much, and I've never found a project I wanted to use it on, and I wouldn't have bought it of my own volition. I am extremely grateful for all those gifts, and I hold no grudge against somebody that buys their yarn at the salvo or buys mass-produced yarn. Sometimes it's all you can afford, and sometimes, depending on where you are, it's all that's available. I mean, there's literally nothing wrong with any of that. I mean, aside from the problems that are inherent in all mass production of goods in modern capitalism, but we won't get ahead of ourselves. Ultimately, for me, all of those things helped to form some very unhealthy shopping and stashing habits. Even when I got to the point where I was more financially secure, I would still go about buying yarn in this way and lying to myself, saying that I would come up with a project for it later, or convincing myself I'd rue the day that I didn't buy those extra 2 skeins. But where it really becomes a problem for me is when that yarn sits here unused. I mean, it's a lot of yarn. And that for me is a recent discovery. I mean, for a long time, I didn't know it was this bad. I take responsibility for my disorganization, but wow, was I flippin' disorganized. I mean, for a long time, I had no place to put my yarn, so it was shoved in a corner over there, tucked in a closet over there, in a bin, under the bed, with my winter clothes. Some of it I kept in a bag in the trunk of my car. Like, why? There were little mini stashes of it everywhere. One time I went to go wrap a gift and I opened the bag I was planning to use and I found 2 skeins of yarn. Like someone had given it to me and I put the bag to reuse with all of my wrapping stuff, yarn and all, and just forgot. Making things even worse is that there were a fair amount of unfinished projects tucked away with each of those stashes. I have like so many unfinished projects all piled up, and like I didn't even know that I had this many tote bags that all these projects were stashed in. I was a mess, and as a result I didn't have to face how much yarn I had. Once I had a place and gathered it all together and put it up here, that's when the shame kicked in. See, more recently in my life, since I have, enough financial security to do so, I have been making an effort to be a more conscious consumer. I am taking the time to look at where I'm buying things and what kind of impact that has. Both the environmental impact and the ethical and economical impact on people's lives. That ethos that I'm trying to hold myself to is in direct contradiction with me owning a bunch of yarn with no intent or purpose. Yes, there's some of this yarn that does have an intended purpose. Let it be finishing one of these incomplete projects or a project that just hasn't happened yet. But the vast majority of it, I have no plan for. I could go out and buy yarn that's very high quality, made in small batches, handmade, and sold at fair trade value. And that would give me the appearance of being a conscious consumer, but that appearance would be a lie, because I would still have all of this yarn that is essentially intended for a landfill. So just by changing my current purchasing habits, that does not solve this. And like, this thought process doesn't just apply to my yarn, it applies to my clothes, or really any good that I buy in my lifetime. And the best thing I can do for those other things is use them until they're not working or fixable, then dispose of them in the best way possible and replace them with a more ethically sourced product. As for the yarn, the Goodwill and the thrift shops in my area are no longer accepting yarn, especially post-COVID. The only charities I have found willing to accept them don't align with many of my values of inclusion and equality. There are some charities in the area that will accept handmade hats and scarves. I just have to make this into hats and scarves. And that really comes to, how do we fix it? And the answer's simple. I have to use all of this yarn. I have spoken with a few friends. So far, only one of them has taken me up on the offer to take any of this yarn. Lucky for me, he chose that baby yarn that I'm not the hugest fan of. My ultimate goal is to get to the point where I am stashless. And what that means is that I want to only buy yarn I need for a purpose and only buy enough for that purpose. First, I plan on completing this pile of unfinished projects. Then I want to work with some of the lower quality yarns, maybe also trying to eliminate some of these smaller bits that are like enough for something, but really just the leftover parts of another project. Then I would want to move my way through the rest of my stash until eventually it's all gone. I do have some projects that are larger and time sensitive that I just may not have the yarn for, that I might have to buy. I'm gonna do my best to avoid that at all costs, but we'll see. Now that brings us to you and why I'm sitting here talking to a camera. A big part of why I'm starting this YouTube channel is to hold myself accountable. And so then eventually we will complete this project. I really think that this will give me the motivation to be actively and consistently working on projects, especially because I am setting the goal of posting every Friday, so I will need to be on schedule in order to consistently post videos. I do have some projects that I would like to explore that you can keep an eye out for. Things like vintage crochet patterns, antique crochet patterns. I do want to try my hand at knitting. We'll see how that goes. I would like to make some pieces for my wardrobe to replace other things that are wearing a bit thin. At some point I had bought lace weight yarn and hooks, which I am tentatively and anxiously excited about. I'm looking forward to that experiment. Also, one of my unfinished projects is actually one that was started by my grandmother over a decade ago. And so I'm really excited to complete that for her. Overall, I'm really excited to jump into this with the ultimate goal of being stashless. I want to thank you again for joining me while I've just kind of rambled on here. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. While I do have a list of projects that I want to make through the next few months, that's barely gonna put a dent in this. So if you have any patterns or projects or yarn related crafts that you would like to see me try at least, feel free to put them in the comments. I would love to see them. I will try to post on Fridays, but if you don't want to miss anything, make sure to ring the notification bell. Until next time, this is Grace signing off. Remember to be excellent to each other. Have a great day. What the f am I gonna use some of these for?